I'm touched.
Hosting the council.
Majority mandate that a significant number
trade discussions as around
landed, and then a job offer shows up, or your old employer calls and asks if you would come back 2 days a week, or your side business suddenly takes off, and a small voice in your head says, wait, if I earn money now, will they cut my pension? Will Service Canada claw it back? Will I be punished for working? In the next few minutes, I am going to give you a clear answer to that question, and then I am going to show you something most people never hear about, a benefit hiding inside the CPP system that can quietly pay you extra money every single month for the rest of your life, simply because you kept working. Stay with me, because there is also a trap in here, and it does not come from CPP at all. Let us start with the fear itself, because it is the single most common worry I hear about this topic. People believe that the Canada Pension Plan works like a test. They imagine that Service Canada is watching their income, and the moment they earn a paycheck, someone reduces their monthly deposit. It feels logical. It also feels like something the government would do, but it is not true, and I want to be as direct as I possibly can be about this. Your CPP retirement pension is not income tested. It does not shrink because you have a job. It does not shrink because you got a raise. It does not shrink because you sold a property or cashed out an investment or picked up contract work. Once your retirement pension starts, the amount is the amount. Why is that? Because CPP is not a welfare program. It is a contributory insurance program. You paid into it, your employers paid into it alongside you, and the amount you receive is calculated from your own contribution history.
Nous ne pouvons pas bâtir un avenir meilleur si nous ne sommes pas aux commandes de notre présent. Oui.
It is closer in spirit to a workplace pension than to a social assistance benefit. The calculation looks at your earnings across your entire working life, from age 18 until the moment you start your pension, drops out your lowest earning years under the general dropout provision, adjusts your past earnings so that they are measured against today's wage levels, and then produces a monthly figure. Once that figure is locked in, it is locked in. From that point on, it only moves in one direction, upward, with annual indexation to inflation. So let me say it one more time in the plainest words I can find. Working does not cut your CPP. Not at 60, not at 65, not at 70. There is no earnings limit, no penalty, no reduction. If somebody at a family dinner tells you that they know a person who lost their pension because they went back to work, that person did not lose their CPP retirement pension. They lost something else, and I will tell you exactly what that something else was later in this video, because it is a real risk and you need to see it coming. Now that the fear is out of the way, let us get to the part that actually puts money in your pocket, because here is where the story gets interesting. Not only does working while collecting CPP fail to hurt you, in many cases it actively pays you more. The rules depend on your age, and there are 3 distinct zones. Zone 1 runs from 60 to 65. If you have started your CPP retirement pension and you are still working as an employee, contributions are mandatory. You do not get a choice. Your employer will keep deducting CPP from your paycheck, and your employer will keep matching it. Some people hear that and feel annoyed. Paying into a pension you are already receiving sounds like a cruel joke, but hold that thought, because those contributions are not disappearing into a void. They are buying you something. Zone 2 runs from 65 to 70. In this window, contributions become optional. You are allowed to keep contributing if you want to, and you are allowed to stop if you want to. This is a real choice, and it is one of the very few places in the Canadian retirement system where you get to make a strategic decision that directly changes your future income. Most people do not even know this choice exists. Their payroll department keeps deducting or stops deducting, and they never think about it again. Zone 3 begins at 70. At that point, the door closes. You cannot contribute to CPP anymore, no matter how much you earn, no matter how long you keep working. 70 is the hard ceiling for contributions, exactly as it is the hard ceiling for delaying your pension start date. So what are those contributions actually buying you? This is the piece almost nobody talks about, and it has a name. It is called the post-retirement benefit. You will see it written as PRB, and it is one of the most underappreciated features of the entire Canada Pension Plan. Here is how it works. Every calendar year in which you contribute to CPP while already receiving your retirement pension, you earn a brand new, separate, additional lifetime benefit. It is not a bonus. It is not a one-time payment. It is a permanent increase to your monthly income, added automatically, and it starts the January after the year you made the contributions. You do not apply for it. You do not fill out a form. Service Canada calculates it from your tax return and your payroll records, and it simply appears. And listen carefully to this next part, because it is the detail that surprises people the most. The post-retirement benefit is paid even if you are already receiving the maximum CPP retirement pension.
Jean Chrétien. Absolument.
Think about what that means. Under the normal rules, there is a ceiling. Once you hit the maximum, extra contributions in your working years do nothing for you. But the PRB breaks through that ceiling. If you are at the maximum and you keep working and contributing, you go above the maximum. You end up with more than the system's official cap. How much are we talking about? Each full year of maximum contributions buys you roughly 1/40th of the maximum retirement pension.
With other countries. We've signed 20 new deals on 4 continents in less than a year because Canada has what the world wants, from energy to education.
In recent years, that has worked out to somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 to $50 per month, added for life, for 1 year of work. The exact figure changes every year with the contribution limits, so treat that as a ballpark rather than a promise, and check the current year's numbers when you are doing your own planning. If you earned less than the maximum, your PRB is proportionally smaller. If you earned more than the maximum, it does not matter, because contributions stop at the ceiling anyway. There are 2 adjustments worth knowing. If you earn a PRB before age 65, it is reduced, using the same monthly reduction logic that applies to taking your pension early. If you earn one after 65, it is increased, using the same monthly enhancement logic that applies to delaying. So a post-retirement benefit earned at 68 is worth meaningfully more per month than one earned at 61, for the identical amount of contributions. That alone should make you think differently about which years you choose to keep contributing. And once a PRB is in place, it behaves exactly like the rest of your pension. It is indexed to inflation every January. It continues for as long as you live. It can generate a survivor component for your spouse under the survivor rules. It is, in every practical sense, a permanent raise. Now let me stack that up over several years, because the effect compounds in a way that people underestimate. Imagine someone who starts CPP at 65 and keeps working full-time until 70. That is 5 years of contributions, 5 separate post-retirement benefits, each one added in January of the following year, each one indexed from that point forward. 5 times $40-something a month is not going to change your life on its own, but it is a couple of $100 a month, guaranteed, inflation protected, and paid until your final day. If that person lives another 20 years, we are talking about tens of thousands of dollars that they would have walked away from if they had opted out. Here is the part that makes the arithmetic even better. If you are an employee, your employer is matching every dollar you contribute. You put in $1, they put in $1, and the post-retirement benefit is calculated on the full amount. So your personal cost is effectively half of what is buying that benefit. There are not many places in Canadian financial life where somebody hands you a 50% match on a purchase of guaranteed indexed lifetime income. When you look at it that way, continuing to contribute between 65 and 70 starts to look less like a nuisance and more like an opportunity. The picture is different if you are self-employed. When you work for yourself, you pay both halves. There is no employer standing beside you writing a matching check. So the same post-retirement benefit costs you roughly twice as much. That does not make it a bad deal automatically, because the benefit is still guaranteed for life and still indexed, and very few private products can match that combination. But it does make the decision much closer, and it deserves a proper calculation rather than a shrug. If you are self-employed and you are in that 65 to 70 window, this is genuinely worth sitting down with a pen and running the numbers on, or bringing to an accountant who understands CPP mechanics rather than just filing your return. So how do you actually make this choice? If you are an employee between 65 and 70 and you want to stop contributing, you cannot simply tell your payroll department to stop. There is a specific election form for this, and it has to be completed and given to your employer, with a copy sent to the tax authority. Once your employer receives it, contributions stop from the first day of the month after they get it. And there is a limit. You can only make this election once in a calendar year. If you change your mind and want to start contributing again, there is a revocation process, and that too can only be done once a year. So this is not a switch you can flip back and forth every few months. Decide deliberately. If you are self-employed and you want to stop contributing in that same age window, the mechanism is different. You handle it through the appropriate schedule on your tax return, electing the month from which you want contributions to cease. Again, this is a once-per-year decision, so treat it seriously. And if you have multiple employers or you change jobs mid-year, you have to give the election to each one. A form sitting in one employer's file does not stop deductions at the second job. This is exactly the kind of administrative detail that costs people money quietly, without anyone ever telling them. Now let us talk about taxes, because this is where working while collecting CPP genuinely does change your situation, and where a lot of the vague anxiety around this topic actually comes from. Your CPP retirement pension is taxable income. Full stop. It goes on your return alongside everything else. So if you are receiving CPP and you also have employment income, the two stack on top of each other.
Canada's Prime Minister says he and the US President have agreed to escalate trade discussions as a row over import tariffs heats up. It comes a day after Donald Trump.
That combined total is what determines your tax bracket. And here is what catches people out. There is no tax automatically withheld from your CPP payments unless you specifically request it. Your employer withholds tax from your paycheck based on your employment income, and Service Canada sends your CPP with nothing taken off. Neither party knows about the other. So you arrive at tax time, add the two together, and discover you owe money you did not budget for. This is entirely avoidable. You can request voluntary tax withholding on your CPP payments, choosing either a flat dollar amount or a percentage, and Service Canada will take it off before the deposit reaches your account. It is a simple request, and it turns an unpleasant April surprise into a non-event. Alternatively, you can ask your employer to withhold extra tax from your paycheck to cover the pension income. Either approach works. Doing nothing is the approach that hurts. There is one more wrinkle. If you consistently owe a significant amount at filing time, the tax authority may require you to start paying quarterly installments. Once you are in that system, missing an installment can trigger interest charges. So the earlier you get your withholding right, the less likely you are to end up on that treadmill. And while we are on the tax side, do not forget that the CPP contributions you keep making are not tax neutral. A portion of your contributions generates a tax credit, and the enhanced portion of the contributions is deductible against your income. For self-employed people, the treatment is more generous still, since you are paying both halves. So the real after-tax cost of buying yourself a post-retirement benefit is lower than the raw deduction on your pay stub suggests. Whenever you are comparing the cost of contributing against the value of the benefit, use the after-tax cost, not the gross number, or you will talk yourself out of a good deal. Now, the trap I promised you, because there is a real clawback in the Canadian retirement system, and if you are working while collecting a pension, you need to know exactly where it lives. It does not live in CPP. It lives in old age security. Old age security has a recovery tax, and most Canadians know it by its nickname, the OAS clawback. Here is the mechanism. There is an income threshold, and it is adjusted every year. In recent years, it has sat somewhere in the low $90,000s of net income. For every dollar of net income you have above that threshold, you repay 15 cents of your old age security. Keep climbing and eventually the recovery reaches 100% and your OAS is entirely wiped out. The upper limit where that happens is higher if you are over 75, because the OAS payment itself is larger at that age. Check the current year's exact figures rather than relying on numbers you heard once, because they move every single year.
Growing Canada's economy and making life more affordable go hand in hand. That's why we discussed how.
Notice what triggers it. Net income. Not employment income specifically, not CPP specifically, but the total. So your employment income, your CPP, your OAS itself, your investment income, your withdrawals from registered retirement accounts, your capital gains, all of it counts toward that threshold. This is the reason people say they lost part of their pension because they went back to work. They did not lose CPP. They pushed their net income over the OAS threshold and lost some old age security. Is that a reason not to work? Almost never. Think about what the clawback actually costs you. 15 cents on the dollar, layered on top of your marginal tax rate. Yes, that is a meaningful effective rate and it is worth planning around. But it still means you keep the majority of every additional dollar you earn. Nobody should turn down a good job because of a 15% recovery tax on the portion of income above a threshold that most Canadians never reach in the first place. The mistake is not working. The mistake is failing to plan for it. And there are things you can do about it. You can time discretionary income, deciding which year to realize a capital gain or take a large withdrawal. You can contribute to a registered retirement savings plan if you still have contribution room, since that reduces net income directly and can pull you back under the threshold. You can use a tax-free savings account for investments, since withdrawals from it do not count as income at all. You can split eligible pension income with a spouse, which moves income from the higher earner to the lower earner and can rescue OAS for the higher earner. And here is a strategic one that fits perfectly with today's topic. If you know you are going to have high employment income until 70, you can delay starting your old age security. Delayed OAS grows by a set percentage for every month you postpone, up to age 70, and you cannot be clawed back on a benefit you are not yet receiving. So you work, you earn, you avoid the recovery tax entirely, and you start a permanently larger OAS the moment your employment income stops. That is not a loophole.
Accessing specialized care. We have a situation in Nunavut where we need more care closer to.
That is the system working exactly as designed for people who keep earning. There is a second, much sharper clawback, and this one deserves real attention because it affects the people who can least afford a mistake, the Guaranteed Income Supplement. GIS is a benefit for low-income seniors, and unlike CPP, it absolutely is income tested, and aggressively so. Extra income can reduce GIS at a steep rate, and for someone relying on it, taking a part-time job without understanding the rules can produce a deeply unpleasant surprise. But even here, the system is not as punishing as people assume because there is a specific exemption for employment and self-employment income. A first slice of earned income each year is fully exempt from the GIS calculation, and a further slice above that receives a partial exemption. The design intent is exactly what it sounds like. The government wanted to make sure that low-income seniors who take a modest job are not punished for it. So if you receive GIS and you are thinking about part-time work, the practical advice is to understand where those exemption thresholds sit for the current year and structure your hours accordingly. Modest earnings are protected, large earnings are not. Know which side of the line you are on before you sign the contract, not after. Let me pull all of this together into something you can actually use because I want you to leave this video with a decision framework rather than a pile of facts. Ask yourself 4 questions. First, how old are you right now? Under 65 and working, contributions are mandatory, so there is no decision to make. But you should know that every one of those years is buying you a post-retirement benefit, whether you noticed it or not. Between 65 and 70, you have a genuine choice, and you should make it consciously. Over 70, the question is closed.
Trump said he was imposing a 50% tariff on Canadian goods in retaliation for what he calls discrimination against key US industries. The new tariff.
Second, are you an employee or self-employed? If you are an employee, the employer match makes continuing to contribute a strong proposition in most situations. If you are self-employed, you are paying full freight, and the calculation is much tighter. Third, where does your total net income sit relative to the OAS threshold? And are you receiving GIS? These are the only two places where working can actually reduce a government benefit, and both of them are manageable if you see them coming. Fourth, and this is the one people skip, what is your health and family longevity situation? Every one of these benefits is a lifetime benefit. Lifetime benefits reward people who live a long time. If you have good health and long-lived parents, buying more guaranteed indexed income through continued contributions is a stronger play than it looks on a spreadsheet. If your health situation is difficult, the calculation shifts, and there is no shame in choosing money now over money later. And let me leave you with the mistakes I see most often, so you can avoid them without having to learn the hard way. Assuming CPP is reduced by employment income when it is not. Opting out of contributions between 65 and 70 without ever calculating what that decision costs over a 20-year retirement. Forgetting to request tax withholding on CPP and getting hit at filing time. Confusing the OAS recovery tax with a CPP reduction and turning down work over a fear that does not apply. Not knowing that the GIS employment exemption exists, and starting old age security at 65 out of habit while earning a high income, when delaying would have produced a larger, cleaner, unclawed benefit later.
Definitions, that's aluminum, that's forest products, that's steel, that's automobiles, pharmaceuticals, copper, others. But those first four being the most important.
Working while collecting CPP is not a mistake to be avoided. For a great many Canadians, it is one of the smartest financial moves available in their 60s because it does three things at once. It generates current income. It builds permanent additional pension through the post-retirement benefit. And it lets savings sit untouched for longer, growing quietly in the background. Now, I have been mentioning the post-retirement benefit throughout this video, and I have only scratched the surface of it. How it is calculated in detail, how the numbers change depending on the age at which you earn it, how it interacts with survivor benefits, how it appears on your statement, and how to check that Service Canada actually credited you correctly, because errors do happen and almost nobody checks. That deserves its own full explanation, and I have made a dedicated video on exactly that. If what you heard today made you sit up a little, go watch that one next, because that is where the real numbers live. If this cleared up a worry you have been carrying, do me a favor and let me know in the comments what your situation is, whether you are working, thinking about it, or already collecting. And subscribe, because the Canadian retirement system rewards the people who understand its details. And details are exactly what we do here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.